This lesson is going to be discussing acts and agreements, and this, hopefully you have the handouts for acts and agreements. There's a handout that I gave out last day that has a bunch of blanks for acts and different scenarios relating to each of those blanks. When you go through the lesson, the PowerPoint with my notes, you should be able to fill in those blanks of which act involves which situation, and then on the back as well there's also a series of different situations that you'll have to choose which act applies to it. So the reason why we're introducing acts and agreements is, again, before work experience, it's important for you to understand what your rights are, and if you do feel you are being abused by employers, it does happen, and you'll see that if you look at any of the websites related to these slides, that regularly employees are abused by their employees or by their employers in various different ways, and so these acts help to protect employees in different ways. So health and safety, minimum standards, unionized employees. All of these agreements have different types of protections, and it is important to be aware of that they exist and that you have somewhere to go if you do feel that you're not being treated fairly on the job. So the first one we're going to talk about is the BC Employment Standards Act, and this act, it covers the minimum standards. Okay, so a lot of employers will go above and beyond these rules. They'll provide more for their employees than just the minimum standards, but it's important to still be aware that there are minimum standards that most employers have to follow. Now, there's some exceptions to these rules. Certain types of agricultural farming, farm workers are not necessarily covered under these laws, and so you have to delve into the Act itself in order to get some specifics on who is actually covered by the Act. But it does cover just about all workplaces. So your minimum wage for BC covers most workplaces, and stat holidays, etc., should be about the same for everyone. Now, if you want more information on the Employment Standards Act, you do have a summarized copy of it. If you want the full copy, you just click on the link below and you can look up any of the specifics of the BC Employment Standards Act. And I hope you have also already completed the questions and read through the summary of the Employment Standards Act. Again, those are the most important points that you should be familiar with from the Act. Basically, the purpose of the Act is to ensure employees of BC receive at least basic standards of compensation, meaning how much they're getting paid, and conditions of employment. It's also to promote fair treatment of employees and employers, so it does also protect employers. It also is attempting to encourage open communication between employees and employers, and to provide fair and efficient procedures for resolving for resolving disputes over this Act. And so if there is an issue that comes to the BC Employment Standards, then they will resolve that dispute between the employer and employee. Also, its purpose is to foster the development of a productive and efficient labor force that can contribute fully to the prosperity of BC, and also to contribute in assisting employees who meet work and family responsibilities. So if any of those purposes have not been met in the workplace, you do have an avenue to go to. You do have some place where you can turn for problems in that area. So you can always go to the BC Employment Standards Act, and if you feel that you're being again taken advantage of, then you can go to the Employment Standards branch and lodge a complaint against your employer. So the next piece of legislation that we're looking at is the BC's Workers' Compensation Act. Okay, and this act governs the health and safety in the workplace, and it requires the employer by law to ensure that the work is safe and protects workers who are injured while working. So it empowers WCB, which is the Workers' Compensation Board, to set and enforce occupational health and safety standards. And they also are in charge of providing compensation, so that means payment again, and rehabilitation benefits. Okay, so if an injured employee needs to rehabilitate and get back onto the workforce, they provide funding for that. And also they do provide funding for dependents, and as well to be able to support the dependents of someone who's been injured. So that means children or people in their family that need assistance, and collect funds from businesses to operate the workers' compensation system. Okay, so they will actually charge employers for Workers' Compensation Board will charge employers to pay for insurance so that their workers are covered under Workers' Compensation Board insurance. And so that money is collected and used to run the system, basically. So if an employee gets injured on the job, that money that's collected through the insurance will hopefully pay for everything that the employee needs in order to recover. So the next piece of legislation is the Human Rights Act, and this legislation protects workers from discrimination on grounds ranging from gender to ethnic origins. Now, it can also be discrimination on the basis of mental or physical disability. So it can basically, it's anything that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects. The Human Rights Act should also protect from discrimination against that. A copy of the code is available on this link here. And I've also included the Human Rights Tribunal. This is the organization that deals with any complaints surrounding human rights violations in the workplace. So you would lodge a complaint at the Human Rights Tribunal if you were an employee who was maybe you were fired because of a something that you were discriminated against, and as such you were fired as a result of that, or even if you weren't hired because of some discrimination, some form of discrimination. And I've also got an example of a Human Rights Tribunal case. If you actually go to this main website, you can click on any old cases that they have, and you can read up on any of the decisions that they've made. This one's an older decision, but it's interesting and gives you an idea of what kinds of cases the Human Rights Tribunal will listen to. And the purpose of the Human Rights Act is to foster a society in BC in which there are no impediments to full and free participation in the economic, social, political, and cultural life of BC. So it sounds like they're also trying to cover off more than just the workplace. So I'm not sure how that plays out, but that's part of its purpose. And another part is to promote climate of an understanding and mutual respect, which where we are all equal in dignity and rights. It's attempting to prevent discrimination prohibited by the code. Its purpose is also to identify and eliminate persistent patterns of inequality associated with discrimination, and to provide a means of redress for those persons who are discriminated against. So it's providing a way of settling disputes between employers and employees. Now, the BC Labour Relations Code is slightly different in the sense that it's dealing with specifically just dealing with unionized workers or people attempting to form a union. Okay, so it deals with unions and how they organize, meaning how they create themselves, bargain, so when they attempt to gain better rights and benefits through their employer or with their employer, that's the bargaining process, and operate, how the union will run itself. So this act protects people who form unions and who are in unions from being punished by management. And the copy of the BC Labor Relations Code is available on this website. And the LRB, which is the short form of the Labor Relations Board, okay, so it's actually the board that makes these decisions. If you click on any of the hyperlinks attached to this link here, you can hear about any of their high-profile BC cases, and you can see the resolution of those cases. So there's a whole listing of, many cases that they've made important decisions in BC regarding labor relations, and you can find out more about those. So again, it's specifically related to union workers or workers attempting to join unions. And whoops, I'll go back. And so there's some really interesting decisions on that. I also will mention that the purpose of this is, the code, is that it recognizes the rights and obligations of employees, employers, and trade unions. It fosters the employment of workers in an economically viable business. And the code is also attempting to encourage the practice and procedures of collective bargaining between employers and trade unions. And we'll talk about collective bargaining in a moment. But that's just basically where the employer and the employee sit together and hopefully try and improve working conditions or pay or benefits to employees. That's called collective bargaining. So the Act attempts to encourage cooperative participation in between employers and trade unions in resolving workplace issues, adapting to changes in the economy, and developing workforce skills. It promotes conditions favorable to the orderly constructive and expedited settlement of disputes. And its hope is to minimize the effects of labor disputes on persons not involved with those disputes. So, for example, when there is a labor dispute and possibly some workers will go out on strike, that is also affecting other employees who may actually not be part of the union because they're working in the same building, or they're working for the same company but they're just not unionized. There's certain particular employees part of that company that are unionized and others are not. And if one group goes out on strike, it makes it difficult for other people to go to work because some workers don't feel that they can cross the picket line, or there's other reasons. So the ultimate purpose of the code is, or one of the purposes of the code is, to prevent people from losing out on their work. Okay, so losing possibly money, pay, and losing job days working. Okay, it also is attempting to encourage public interest in protecting labor disputes, and encourages the use of mediation as a dispute resolution mechanism. So attempting to get parties to mediate a disagreement. Okay, so collective agreement is the last one. And again, I sort of highlighted this one already. It's not a form of legislation so much as it's a legal document that is negotiated and voted on by union members. So the employees get together with the employer and they discuss any working conditions, pay, benefits, etc., and they try to negotiate a collective agreement. And that collective agreement is then voted on by the union members, and then this is the contract that sets out any of the terms and conditions of employment. Okay, so again, this would be above and beyond the Employment Standards Act. So you've got your Employment Standards Act, your minimum wage, and usually collective agreements will traditionally the pay is better in a union, and benefits are better in a union as well. So a collective agreement will protect unionized employees and give them better, hopefully better benefits and pay than just the regular basic minimum standards provided by the Employment Standards Act. Okay, so that's just about it for the acts and agreements, and hopefully I've given you enough information that you can now go ahead and answer the questions related to acts and agreements that I've given you in the handout, both sides. If you do have any questions, though, you can message me on Schoology. The other thing related to BC Employment Standards Act, I will list off any answers that are not in the summarized version of the Employment Standards Act so that you can fill those in. I believe there's a couple of questions related to the number of days for leave and stuff like that. So I think there was a few answers missing off of the summarized version of the Act. You can look at the full version to look up the answers to that, or you can wait and I will post those answers later.